Your first your first complex, we got that closed. You had a full
Mhm.
cycle on it, and
Yeah,
ultimately you were in the same room as other people with knowledge and
yeah.
experience. And is that something you can say helped get it all the way through to the full cycle after things didn't quite work out as planned?
That's helped me in not in just this, but in every step of the game is being around the people that have more experience than me, and it goes back to that cliche, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room type. But yeah, at every point, whenever I've hit a plateau and just taking that a little bit deeper dive, every time I've hit a plateau, um, it usually takes me a couple months to realize that I've plateaued, unfortunately. But every time I realize that I hit a plateau, I find somebody that can help me through. It's kind of, whether it's a coaching thing or whether it's, some other sort of relationship, there's always, I've always searched for somebody that can help me kind of break through and get that. And a lot of times it is paid coaching. I've paid a lot of money for that, but I think there's a whole lot of value in, being around other people who know what they're doing, who are ahead of you and able to show you the ropes.
Yeah, I think by nature we run from things that we don't fully understand or comprehend. At least
Mhm.
I've noticed that about myself. Like I will
True.
look for excuses not to, personal excuses not to go and pursue something because it might
Mhm.
be intimidating or I just don't understand the way it works.
Yeah.
And if I know that about myself, that's a weakness. Now I can go seek knowledge and hopefully seek mentorship of how does this work? What
Yeah.
is a uh, even a new development, what is a build to suit, and how do you structure those deals with tenants, and
Yeah.
what are the mechanics of it? How does it make sense? So that's one thing
Mhm.
that just came up recently in my life. But so
Yeah.
you got your first deal done, full
Mhm.
cycle, but in the
Yep.
interim, you're also doing other deals and
Yes.
building
Yeah.
up your confidence. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
After the first deal, like I said, it was a $4 million purchase price in 2019. I mean, those two properties together are probably worth twice that now. But so yeah, $4 million purchase price. That the capital raise was big enough that I think we took a step back. And we were buying in South Carolina, and the price per door, if you compare it to other metros, was pretty low. I mean, we were buying things for $30,000 to $50,000 a unit, which you don't really find anywhere now. But anyway, so we kind of took a step back for a second, and it's like, all right, let's do something that we can do a little bit easier, if that makes sense. I mean, after struggling to raise, I think we raised 1.8 for that first deal. But after struggling to do that, the next one we did was a smaller, slightly smaller property. And then we slowly kind of ramped back up to where we were doing larger and larger properties, to where we were doing, multiple $1 million raises. And our unit count just, kept on getting higher and higher and higher. So, yeah, a lot of it was the confidence, we had somewhat of a track record after that first one, and I kinda wanna say a lot of investors are stupid, but I don't wanna offend anybody. But I mean, the reality is, we were pointing to all these other properties that we closed, and, very few people, they would look at that at our track record. Oh, they already own, 200 units. They already own 400 units. And I think 2020, 2021, there was like this euphoria about investing, and raising money was super easy. And a lot of people just weren't asking the questions, how's your portfolio doing right now? But anyway, long story short, we were able to keep on raising money and kept on doing what we were doing. We were doing value add C class. Um, and we did very well on a lot of the other properties. Um, I think our highest annualized return was over 40%, but I think most of our properties landed somewhere, between 20 and 30% annualized return, so
Nice.
and we just started, going higher and higher and higher on our numbers. Um, and then I think I mentioned earlier, I stepped away from a partnership. Lots of reasons for it. Um, Part of it was I retired, so I was moved across the country, and the company that I had co-founded was based out of the Carolinas, and now I'm in Idaho. And anyway, lots of reasons for leaving, but I've essentially done the exact same thing. Is I've stepped back a little bit. It's like, okay, we were buying these large properties with large capital raises. So when I started the company, I did the same thing. It's like, all right, I'm going to step back a little bit, and I'm basically rinsing, taking the lessons learned from all the properties we've done, the previous experiences I've had, and doing it again, focusing in a different market. And Salt Lake City is where I'm focusing right now. So I mean, that's kind of like the evolution of how I got to where I'm at. But
Yeah, Salt
a
Lake
lot of
City.
it
That's
is, yeah,
I've been hearing good stuff about that market.
yeah, it's a great market. It's U.S. News and World Report just came out and said the Utah state economy is the best in the nation,
Yeah,
and 90% of the population's in the greater Salt Lake City area. So the Salt Lake City economy is booming right now, and a lot of people are moving there. So
yeah.
yeah.
Sounds like you got there early too, so that makes a
Mhm.
huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, early's always relative. I wish I would have started buying, just kind of an aside, if you go back 5 years ago when I started the coaching program, my coach told me to pick at most two markets, and I picked Salt Lake City, the market that I was born and raised in, and I picked Columbia, South Carolina, which is
Yeah,
the market my wife was born and raised in, right? So two markets that between the two of us, we knew well, and where we had, family that lived there. We had a support network, in those areas. So I just happened to get a property in South Carolina under contract first, but part of me wonders, man, what would have happened if I would have found a Salt Lake, or if I would have put a little more effort into Salt Lake? Because I mean, South Carolina's done extremely well
yeah,
economically, and prices have done well. But I think Salt Lake City would have been the better choice. But hindsight's 2020.
yeah, yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah.
So, Brian, if you had to start over, what
Mhm.
what would you do different?
Oh, good question. I would have tried to start earlier. I mean, that's really it. I got into single family in 2006, 2007 timeframe. Um, I think I would have started earlier, and I would have tried to convince myself earlier that I can go bigger and I can do bigger things. I think there was a lot of lack of confidence in myself up front. Like, um, my parents, the only real estate they own is the house they live in. They never talked about investing. Money was the only time we talked about money. It was like, how much we didn't have growing up, and how we kind of had the house growing up was like a scarcity mindset. I think that a lot of that carried into my adulthood, and if I were to go back and do things differently, I hope I would have convinced myself at an earlier age that I could still do, big things like what I'm trying to do now. So, but yeah, I mean, really looking back at it, I think that at every point where I had crucial decisions to make, I think I made the best decision with the information I had, and the person I was at the time.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing how growing up you're programmed in certain beliefs and
Yeah.
habits, and how that affects just how you come out. There's a
Yeah.
book, The Four Agreements. I would
Hmm.
recommend everybody to read, but it goes over just that, the agreements to live by in life, and then how people can affect you just on base what they say. But
Yeah.
the what would be a piece of advice
Mhm.
that was just a piece of advice that you've used throughout your career that was valuable?
I think one book that's been extremely influential in how I think is like the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. I think the one thing that I take away most from that is habit two. Anyway, it's begin with the end in mind. I don't remember if
Yeah,
it's two or three, but I think it's habit two. But yeah, you begin with the end in mind, and I've really started thinking a lot about that lately. Like, what is it that I'm creating? It's
mhm,
I think with the first partnership I had, I never really sat back and I think us as a group never really sat back and thought, what are we creating? And you either do it deliberately or you don't, and that's kind of like what the habit two says is, you are whether you realize it or not, you're creating the rest of your life today, and you can either do it deliberately or you can do it, haphazardly. And so right now, a lot of what I'm thinking about is, what is it that I am creating? What is that end? And not only what is that end, but how do I, what do I need to do to get there?
Yeah.
And something that's on my mind right now is pushing it forward. So my goal is by the end of this, by the end of 2030. So I got 7 years. I want to have 10,000 units, which in Salt Lake City is, roughly $3.5 billion worth of real estate, and so that was like an instinct that I chose a year ago, and we're pushing towards that goal, and that's still the goal. But something else I'm starting to think about is, what else goes along with that? I
Yeah.
mean, I'm going to create this engine that's going to be spitting out, a lot of money as we're doing it. Now I'm starting to think about, okay, now how to get my family ready for that,
Yeah.
and how to set that up, how to structure it so I can eventually step away from that and keep going. So really it's beginning with the end in mind. And every time I pick an end and pick a date, and start working towards it, there's always, okay, well, what then? What comes after that? And I think there's a couple times in my life where I've really failed to think about what comes after, and I've failed to deliberately plan, what's coming up. And I've just kind of lived in the moment and then realized, oh crap, I kind of painted myself in a corner. So
Yeah. Constantly looking to create new problems. If you create a new problem, now you have to have that kind of means you're
mhm.
growing. It means you're
Yeah,
evolving out of your old you and into your new you. And if
yeah,
you're creating new problems, that's growth. So
yeah.
10,000 units, that's incredible. What is Streamline Capital? What does
Mhm.
that look like? The infrastructure?
Infrastructure right now, there are three of us that are working full time, um, and instead of a partnership, I've chose to hire people. Um, I mean, there are pros and cons of partnerships, but as we were talking about earlier, kind of an informal mentorship relationship I have. I was talking with somebody who's several years ahead of me in certain aspects, and I was telling him, hey, I just left my partnership. I want to start buying real estate in Salt Lake City. And, I'm really just looking for the right partner. And I'm being very cautious about that. And this guy's had several different businesses. He looked at me, he's like, why do you want a partner? And I went through everything I learned in my coaching course. I hadn't really changed my mindset yet. And, his response to me was like, you're not looking for a partner. He's like, Brian, you're looking for an employee. And I didn't really, it didn't register, but as I started really thinking, I mean, he probably spent 2 minutes explaining why I should not look for a partner. I should start hiring people. And fortunately at that time, we had come full cycle on several properties. I had the money in the bank, I had the liquidity, I had the ability to hire people. So what it looks like right now, is I have an acquisitions director hired and I have an investor relations director hired. And, we are constantly looking for stuff along, the Wasatch Front, the greater Salt Lake City area. And the next hire for me is going to be an asset manager.
Yeah.
But as far as how we're organized, I mean, we use the EOS system. I guess that's redundant because the S in EOS is system, but we use EOS to run everything and
Based off
speak
Traction, the book.
based off the book Traction. Yes.
Great.
So, yeah, and speaking of what I said earlier with the coaching, we've hired an EOS implementer. And so, we sit down with him very frequently and, just kind of go through making sure that our structure is set up, and if we failed at one thing with my previous partnership, it was setting up the foundation. And like I
Yeah.
said, we didn't really look at what was coming, and so we didn't really prepare for it. So what I'm really adamant about on this one is setting up the foundation right. Make sure we have a lot of stuff in place. And fortunately, because of my previous success, I'm in a position right now where I can pay people salaries and be able to do that until we start making a lot more money on deals. So I mean, we should be closing one in the next, our first one together in the next week or two. And we've got a couple LOIs out right now,
Yeah.
and we'll see how things pan out. But the
Yeah.
goal is 4 acquisitions in the next 9 months, and set up the structure, have the foundation set up. And then once the foundation's set up, we're just going to stomp on that gas pedal.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, your foundation, if you set it up the right way,
Mhm.
enterprise in mind, the scalability is massive.
Yeah.
It goes all the way through you. You got checks and
Yep.
balances, internal growth. That's
Hmm.
it's huge.
Yep. So
Love it.
yeah,
Sounds like you got big plans, man. It's going to be good. I'm going to be
yeah,
excited to follow.
gonna be
If
fun.
somebody wants to reach out to you, how can they get a hold of you?
Lots of ways. Website is streamlinecapitalgroup.com. Um, LinkedIn is probably the best way to reach out to me. And, I probably spend a couple hours on LinkedIn a day, especially with messaging. But yeah, look me up on LinkedIn. I also have a podcast. I think you mentioned that at the beginning of the show, Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. And yeah, that's it.
Awesome. All right, Brian, we appreciate you coming on today. And again, I look forward to following you, and we'll certainly talk soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh.